When people think about Montgomery, Alabama, they usually think about two chapters of American history: the birth of the Confederacy and the Civil Rights Movement. And strangely enough, both of those stories meet right here on this hill. This is the Alabama state capitol. At first glance, it looks like a classic Southern landmark: tall white columns, a bright dome, and a sweeping staircase climbing up from Dexter Avenue. But the ground around this building holds more than 170 years of American history, and some of the most powerful moments ever witnessed in the South. After exploring the abandoned pioneer village earlier that day, we made our way into downtown Montgomery. Before stopping here, we actually drove past a few other historic sites to capture some dashcam footage, including the Hank Williams statue, Union Station, and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. But as we circled the block near the Capitol looking for parking, we kept spotting more and more historic markers. So eventually we did what any curious travelers would do. We parked the truck, paid a whole $1.40 for the meter, and decided to just start walking. And honestly, it didn't take long to realize we had stepped into one of the most historically dense parts of the entire city. Almost immediately, we found ourselves surrounded by monuments, historic plaques, and landmarks from different eras of American history. Just down Dexter Avenue sits Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. served as pastor during the Montgomery bus boycott in the mid-1950s. Today, the church is known as Dexter Avenue King Memorial Baptist Church, honoring the role it played during the Civil Rights Movement. Nearby, the Civil Rights Memorial Center and its peaceful memorial fountain honor those who lost their lives during the struggle for civil rights. Even if you're just walking past, it's a powerful place to pause and reflect. Not far away stands the headquarters of the Southern Poverty Law Center, another organization deeply tied to the long fight for justice and equality in the South. Within just a few blocks, the streets of Montgomery tell the story of a movement that changed the nation. But perhaps the most powerful moment tied to this hill happened on March 25th, 1965. After marching 54 miles from Selma, thousands of civil rights protesters arrived here at the Alabama state capitol. They had faced violence, arrests, and national attention along the way. Now they stood at the foot of the very building where so many laws had once denied them the right to vote. Standing on these steps, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous "How long, not long" speech. Within months, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 would become law. Today, monuments along the street mark the end of the Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail, reminding visitors just how significant this place became during that moment in history. But the story of this building goes back even further. Nearly a century before the Civil Rights Movement, the Alabama state capitol played a very different role in American history. In February of 1861, delegates from several southern states gathered here to form a new government after seceding from the United States. Inside this building, they created the Confederate States of America. On February 18, 1861, Jefferson Davis stood on the Capitol's east portico and took the oath of office as President of the Confederacy. A brass star embedded in the stone marks the exact spot where he stood. For several months, Montgomery served as the capital of the Confederacy before the government moved to Richmond, Virginia. Because of that moment, this building is often called the birthplace of the Confederacy. As we continued walking around the grounds, it became clear that the Capitol complex is filled with memorials representing many different chapters of American history. There are monuments honoring World War veterans, memorials dedicated to those who served their country, and historic markers describing Alabama's earliest state capitals. Nearby stands Bicentennial Park, filled with plaques and sculptures commemorating Alabama's 200 years of state history. We even spotted a few unusual monuments, including trees grown from cuttings taken from historic locations connected to the American Revolution and Civil War battlefields. It's the kind of place where every few steps reveal another piece of history. Of course, the centerpiece of it all is the Alabama State Capitol itself. The current building was completed in 1851 after the original Capitol burned down just a few years earlier. Its design follows the Greek Revival style, which was popular for government buildings across the United States during the 19th century. Standing at the top of the hill, the view looking down Dexter Avenue toward the city is impressive. In fact, the bright white buildings and monuments in this area reminded me a little of walking around Washington, D.C. And even though we didn't end up touring the inside that day, just walking the grounds gave us a fascinating glimpse into the layers of history surrounding the building. Now, if you've watched our adventures for a while, you probably know that Dusty and I have very different walking styles. Dusty is about 5 inches taller than I am, and she walks just a little bit faster. She also has a habit of wandering off whenever something catches her attention. So while we were exploring the monuments around the Capitol, I spent a good part of the time casually trying to keep her in sight so we didn't lose each other somewhere in the historic district. Thankfully, Montgomery isn't that big, but it did make for an interesting sightseeing strategy. After about an hour of wandering around the Capitol grounds and the surrounding streets, we were both pretty tired and more than a little warm. But it turned out to be one of the most interesting stops of the entire trip. Within just a few blocks, we had walked more than a century of American history, from the birth of the Confederacy to the fight for civil rights to the modern monuments remembering both. Places like this remind you that history isn't just something you read about in books. Sometimes it's written right into the streets beneath your feet. Join Dusty and I as we uncover the strange, sacred, and sometimes spooky across the South, one back road at a time. And if you enjoy exploring historic places like this, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stop on our Alabama road trip, because you never know what stories might be waiting just around the corner.